Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another DFO Fantasy Show. It is Monday, December the 8th, and I'm your host, Brock Seguin, managing fantasy editor of dailyfaceoff.com. And today we will be getting to the fantasy hockey news and notes, Brock's lock of the day, and then we'll break down the Week 10 strength of schedule and go over the best streaming targets for this week. They are a little bit limited, but there are some great ones out there. But let's dive in first to the news and notes for December 8th. Matt Duchene confirmed yesterday that he was dealing with a concussion, had a really lengthy rehab process, but he returned to the Stars lineup on Sunday. He was eased back into the lineup on the fourth line, similar to what they did with Jamie Benn, but he started taking shifts with Wyatt Johnston and Mikko Rantanen later in the game, and I think that's probably going to be the permanent spot for him the way the lineup looks right now. They look pretty comfortable with Jamie Benn skating alongside Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson, so Duchene, Johnston, and Rantanen seems to make a lot of sense. Obviously, that would put him in a spot to make him an excellent pickup, although he is already rostered in 53% of Yahoo leagues, but that just means he's available in 47% of leagues. So check out the waiver wire to make sure Matt Duchene is not out there in your format. Next, we've got Evgeni Malkin from the Pittsburgh Penguins. He missed Sunday's game with an upper body injury. We were told that he was going to be good to go after missing practice on Saturday, but he ended up not being available. He's considered day-to-day and questionable to play Tuesday versus the Anaheim Ducks. Next, Jordan Kyrou left Saturday's game with a lower body injury for the St. Louis Blues. On Sunday, head coach Jim Montgomery said that Kyrou is expected to miss 7 to 10 days, but they are waiting on MRI to confirm that timeline. It sounds like he could miss a little bit longer if the results come back not in his favor. And then lastly, we've got Elias Pettersson, the forward from the Vancouver Canucks. He missed Saturday's game with an upper body injury. He did take the ice for warmups and only lasted about a minute, left the ice, and did not place on Saturday, and is questionable to play Monday against the Detroit Red Wings. That is going to do it for the news and notes for December 8th. Now let's get to Brock's lock of the day. And this segment is a presentation of Betway. Join the action and download the Betway app. Create an account today and enjoy our sign-up bonus, 18 plus, and please play responsibly. So last time I chatted with everybody, we was on Thursday, and we had Dylan Larkin over 2.5 shots on goal, minus 140. That hit, ending a 2-day losing streak for us. So that brings us to 17-12 on the season. We are still up 9% ROI. Up over 3 units on the season. Tonight, we're going back to the Detroit Red Wings. And tonight, instead of a shot prop, we're going to take a look at a point prop. We've done this a couple times so far this season. And tonight, we're going to look at Patrick Kane for an anytime point. At Betway, he is being paid out minus 140 for an anytime point, which is great odds when you consider the tear that he has been on as of late. He has registered a point in 4 consecutive games, but he's also recorded a point in 7 of his last 8 games. That's 87% of the time. If you want an even larger sample size, he's recorded a point in 10 of his last 13 games. That is 76.9%, or the equivalent of minus 333 for nearly a month. And tonight you get him at minus 140. And tonight he faces a Canucks team that gives up the most goals against per 60 in the NHL. And during his 13-game stretch there, he has 9 of his 14 points have come on the power play. And the Vancouver Canucks have the 3rd worst PK percentage in the league this season. So it is just an absolutely tremendous matchup for the Red Wings offense tonight. And I like Patrick Kane to stay hot with an anytime point at minus 140. So that's going to do it for Brock's lock of the day. Now we will move on to the Week 10 strength of schedule and streaming targets. So as I mentioned, options somewhat limited this week, but we do have the Seattle Kraken and the Utah Mammoth. They have 4 light night games. So those are obviously going to be our priority because Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday have 10, 13, and 13 games. And there's really nobody, there's no teams with 3 light night games. You know, the Red Wings have a decent start to the week in Vancouver and in Calgary with that Monday, Wednesday. So you could make them a bit of a priority early in the week if you want to. The problem is they don't have a lot of great streaming options right now. You'd basically only be looking at Emmett Finney. So keep that in mind. If you feel better about, say, the Red Wings' first two games, if you feel better about Emmett Finney, you could always pick him up for the start of the week and then move on to somebody from Utah and Seattle for that Friday-Sunday schedule, because outside of them, there's nobody else with a Friday-Sunday schedule. So your options this week are extremely limited. I would be looking at maybe LA as well. They've got a Monday-Wednesday schedule. The Calgary Flames Monday-Wednesday schedule. So if you want to waste or use two pickups this week on a streamer and you feel better about the matchups for either the Red Wings, the Kings, or the Flames than you do for Seattle and Utah, which I think would be fair because they both have LA in the mix there on Monday and Wednesday. And obviously the LA Kings are one of the best defensive teams in the league. Obviously the Seattle Kraken against the Wild. The Wild are not very good defensively. The goaltending has been extremely good. The Panthers are pretty tight defensively. So I could see why you would want to potentially stream like an Emmett Finney, good matchups against Vancouver and Calgary. And why you would, look at the Kings, Utah and Seattle, not great matchups. And then the Flames, Buffalo and Detroit, not terrible matchups there either. So if you want to go that route and use two pickups, there are viable options from the Red Wings, from the Kings, and from the Flames. But I'm going to focus primarily on the Seattle Kraken and the Utah Mammoth just because they got the 4 late night games. I think it's easier to not waste that pickup for Monday, Wednesday, and pick those guys up for the weekend. Save some of your ads for later in the week, and then you might be able to get creative with goalies or something. So I think those pickups are valuable. And for me, the difference between picking up somebody from Detroit, LA, and Calgary probably doesn't greatly outweigh the quality that you're going to get from Seattle and Utah, primarily Seattle. And we're going to dive into the reasons why I think that they just are the much better target this week, in my opinion. So let's start with the Seattle Kraken. We've got this top line is playing extremely well. This is not a very high-powered offense, but their top forwards are widely available, and I think they're positioned very nicely for a 4-game stream this week. Everyone on their top line, Matty Beniers, Jared McCann, and Jordan Eberle, are rostered in less than 30% of Yahoo leagues, and they've been excellent. Which since Jared McCann came back, they've been really solid. They have a 3.64 expected goals for per 60 and 3.58 goals for per 60 across 83 minutes together so far this season. They also all skate on that top power play unit, which is great. They do use these power play units a little bit more balanced than other teams, but you got all three of them on that top power play unit with Vince Dunn. So I really like this entire top line this week, and I've been mentioning Jared McCann for a few weeks now, so I'm going to make it 3 in a row here. McCann has 1 goal, 1 assist, 8 shots on goal, and 6 hits in 4 games since returning to the lineup. Over that time, he has 20 shot attempts. That's 5 per game. That's right in line with his pre-injury pace, where he was averaging 5.4 shot attempts per game on the season. So the shot volume is really, really good for McCann. I've mentioned before, he's kind of like the trigger man on that top power play unit. They try to set him up for those 1Ts. And with 4 games on tap, I think McCann has a strong floor and a legitimate chance to have like 10 plus shots on goal, multiple points, multiple goals potentially this week, given his shot volume and given his career rate. So I really like Jared McCann, probably my favorite streaming candidate of the week, but he's up to 29% rostered, so may already be picked up, may already be on your roster if you're listening to me over the last couple of weeks. And then next is Matty Beniers. We're just going to go in terms of ownership here. Beniers is 13% rostered. He doesn't offer the same shooting floor as McCann, but his volume's actually improved this season. He's averaging just over 4 shot attempts per game, so much better than what we've got from Beniers in the past. But he still profiles as more of an assist-heavy streamer right now, which matches his recent results as well. 6 assists, but just 1 goal in his last 10 games. So I still think that with the strong line mates and the 4 light night games, he's still a good streamer, specifically if you need help at center, which won't matter on light nights really, but I think that Beniers is a fine streamer. I think that his ceiling is probably lower than McCann and Jordan Eberle's, though. So he would be 3rd in the pecking order for me based on this top line. Jordan Eberle comes in at 12% rostered, and he's been a little bit snake-bitten recently. No goals and just 2 assists in his last 7 games, but the underlying numbers remain really, really strong. I mentioned a couple weeks ago or last week that if you take a look at all the forwards that are available on the waiver wire under 40% rostered, and I added up their on-ice expected goals for per game, their individual expected goals for per game, and their offensive driving plays per game. And Jordan Eberle ranked number 2 of healthy forwards under 40% rostered in those categories. Number 1 was Patrick Kane. So that just shows how good Eberle has been and how he's been around it all season long. So I really like Eberle as a streamer this week, and I think he's somebody that could turn into some, a longer term hold. The Kraken has really got to start to find some offense. But over the last month, Eberle leads the Kraken in individual expected goals for per game. He's first in on-ice expected goals for per game, and he's second in offensive driving plays per game. So if he continues to generate chances at this rate, I think Eberle could easily wind up being Seattle's top fantasy producer for week 10. I really like him as a pickup. Him and McCann, easily my two favorite ads this week. If you want to go a little deeper down the roster here, I'll keep it quick with the Seattle Kraken. Tolvanen is probably your best banger league streaming option. Over the last 10 games, he's averaging 2 shots on goal, 3.9 shot attempts, and 2.7 hits per game, while also adding 6 points, 3 goals, 3 assists. So he's got some offensive touch. He can score. We know that, but he likes to hit as well. 2.7 hits per game is really nice value in those extended formats. So he provides a really steady floor in those formats and enough scoring touch, I think, to be considered in really deep standard formats. Obviously, if guys like McCann, Beniers, and Eberle are all gone, you might have to fall back to Tolvanen. I doubt that's the case, but just wanted to throw it out there. And then the last one would be Chandler Stephenson. He finally broke a 7-game pointless streak with a goal on Saturday, so that just kind of shows how limited he is offensively. But if you miss out on this entire Seattle top line, like I just mentioned, he's probably the next best fallback option. He plays extremely heavy minutes. He's north of 20 minutes on the season, and he actually leads the Kraken in offensive driving plays per game over the last month. So I mentioned that Eberle's second. It's actually Chandler Stephenson that leads this team. So he sets himself up to produce points in that regard. So I think that, like, obviously the shot volume is not going to wow you, but I think he can probably chip in a couple of assists in those super deep formats this week, but not really a priority for me. But he is also on that top power play unit, offers a little bit of upside there, but he just hasn't capitalized on that during his time in Seattle. But yeah, the numbers are there. Like, the underlying metrics are solid. The offensive driving plays per game, like, he's getting pucks to the dirty areas, and that's going to allow him to produce points, especially playing 20 minutes a night, but it just hasn't really come to fruition yet. So I don't feel super confident that will happen this week either. Now we go to Utah, where things are a lot more difficult. They don't offer very many high-end streaming options because, like, Keller and Logan Cooley, who's actually injured right now, and Dylan Gunther, like, they're all super high-owned. The first two I would take a look at, I'm not going to break them down super in depth because they're probably not available in your leagues. But Nick Schmaltz is at 66% rostered. He might be coming available in some leagues because he was starting to really cool off there for the last little bit, starting to pick it back up again. But he's at 66% rostered, so there's a chance he's available. And then also JJ Peterka, he's been dynamite as of late. He's only 65% rostered. So those are the best pickups overall this week, and probably longer term holds as we move forward as well. The problem is, I usually focus on players that are under 40% rostered at the most. So they are probably not available in your formats, but the first thing you should do is check and see if they were dropped last week, because if they were, they're the best targets for sure, and the easiest ads overall. So I like them, but obviously if they're not available, as I imagine they won't be, you'll likely be dipping your toes into Utah's third line, which sounds gross when you say the sentence, but you might be surprised that this is literally one of the most dominant lines in the NHL this season. Jack McBain, Lawson Krause, and Michael Carcone currently own the highest expected goals for per 60 of any line in the NHL, with over 125 minutes together at 5v5. I believe there's roughly 50 of those lines that qualify for that amount of minutes, and they are number one in XG per 60. Pretty crazy. So they are a much more viable third line from a streaming perspective than most teams have. The problem is they don't have the best finishing ability on this line, obviously. So, like, they haven't always, like, they're scoring goals, but they're not capitalizing. Like, they're not scoring as many goals as your typical line that has like over 4 XG would. But let's talk about him. We'll start with Lawson Krause. He's 11% rostered. I think he's a really strong streamer in every format this week. His 11% ownership is probably, I don't think this is a hot take, is almost exclusively in banger format. So he's probably not available in a ton of banger leagues. I would obviously that's where he's the best, but I think he's fine in standard formats as well. Let's start with the standard formats. He's produced 10 points, 6 goals, 4 assists in his last 19 games. So not an insane production, but solid enough, especially given how good this third line has been. I think it's definitely sustainable. In the extended formats, he's great. 1.5 shots on goal, 2.4 hits, and 1 block per game during that stretch. Just been dynamite. His ice time has also climbed as of late. He's averaging close to 16 and a half minutes per game over his last 13 games, which is very notable for a third liner. Usually around 13, 14 minutes there. He's up north of 16, which is really solid. So he is a much more viable third line stream than most are. Over the last month, he ranks 5th on Utah in terms of individual expected goals for per game as well. So he's definitely been around the net, doing the dirty work. I'm going to forget about the third line for a second and go to the blue line, because Sean Durzi's 7% owned, and I've mentioned him a little bit on this show in the past. And most of his upside is going to be tied to whether or not he can reclaim that spot on the Utah power play unit, top power play unit. But for now, that job seems to firmly belong to Mikhail Sergachev. We saw one game where Durzi saw some time there, and the next game he was bumped back down. So I don't think he's a great high upside pick with the way the power play units are right now. I think he's more of like a profile is more of like a peripheral stream. And I just think like if you're, say, an owner that just recently lost Adam Fox, or you got John Carlson out, like those type of teams could probably use Durzi this week on the blue line, but I don't really think it's necessary. You can go there for sure. He's 7% rostered. He does have some strong underlying peripherals, 1.3 shots on goal, 3.3 shot attempts, 2 blocks, half a hit per game. Like he can chip in those extended formats, but he's just not a high ceiling ad. So unless you're just like really desperate to roster a defenseman this week, I just don't know if it's necessarily, if it's necessary to do so. So let's get back to the forwards. Daniil Boot, we mentioned him a couple weeks ago, or actually last week. I think he's probably the most volatile but interesting stream of the week. I think he's got legitimate upside. Obviously, there's the fact that he was a first-round pick in 2023, number 12 overall. Then you factor in that he also had outstanding AHL numbers before being called up. 8 goals, 17 points in 19 games. But then he also brings an absolutely massive frame, 6'6", 232 pounds, goes to the dirty areas, great net front player. He has yet to record an NHL point yet. And his ice time has been limited to just over 12 minutes a game, but he saw over 14 minutes in their last game. So maybe a sign that he's going to start to earn a few more minutes. They got him comfortable in his first couple games. Maybe going to see some additional usage moving forward. What I really like is that he's averaging 2.0 shots on goal per game, 3.3 shot attempts per game, and Utah has generated 3.32 expected goals for per 60 at 5v5 with him on the ice. Very small sample size, obviously, just 3 games, but those are really good numbers. It means that they are in the offensive zone generating chances while Boot is on the ice. He also leads the Mammoth in individual expected goals for per 60. So obviously, that doesn't matter much when you're only playing 12 minutes a night. If this role continues to grow even slightly, like if he starts to play 14, 15 minutes a night, I think Boot's going to be a really good streamer this week. I think it's just volatile. I think there are better options. Like for me, this is why I'm saying like Seattle makes way more sense to me. I feel way better about Jordan Eberle, Jared McCann, Matty Beniers than I do any of these Utah Mammoth streamers. So I think Seattle is the primary focus, but if they're gone or you got room for a couple of them, I think Boot is definitely a high upside pickup, but also like very limited floor. So I think he's a little risky, but I like the upside. And if the usage grows, I think he could be, I think he could have a great week. The last one we're going to mention, 0% owned, Michael Carcone. He's the most offense-first player on that Utah third line, though his ceiling is somewhat capped by his usage, just averaging 12 minutes, 22 seconds time on ice per game. So, like, that's 4 minutes less than what you're getting from Lawson Crouse, which is why I mentioned his time on ice is so notable. But over the last 17 games, Carcone has 7 points, 2 goals, 5 assists, while averaging 2.0 shots on goal and 4.2 shot attempts, also chipping in 2 hits per game. So the reason I mentioned him is because I said Crouse might not be available in those banger formats. Carcone will be. 0% rostered. He also hits 2.0 hits per game, solid floor in those extended formats. So he's kind of like Crouse light with maybe a little bit more shot volume, maybe a little bit more offensive upside. Really good AHL score throughout his career. So he's got that, like, he's got a good shot. He uses it. He can produce offense. So I think he's somewhat interesting in those deep extended formats as well. So if you take kind of like his career rates, he's a guy that really could offer like 8 shots, 8 hits, and a goal for you this week, which is solid at 0% rostered in those extended formats. So that is pretty much it. As I mentioned, like there are just not a lot of options this week. Again, you could look at Detroit, you could look at LA, and you can look at Calgary for some of those other pickups. If you want, like if you're in a league where there's like 6 pickups a week, I think that might be a little bit more viable, especially if you have to stream Utah players. Like I would look to just stream like maybe Emmett Finney Monday, Wednesday, and then pick up the Utah, maybe Daniil Boot. Makes more of a interesting 2-game streamer on Friday and Sunday against Seattle and against Pittsburgh. And that gives you kind of 2 days or 2 games to like look and see, hey, is his ice time increasing? Because if that ends up being the case, then I think that he makes for a better streamer come the weekend. The other name I didn't really mention is Barrett Hayton. He just has done nothing. But he is in the top 6 again because Logan Cooley's out. The problem is we don't know if Logan Cooley is going to be out long term. If he's going to be back Monday, we don't know yet. So I think, again, Barrett Hayton, probably more of a desperation stream come the weekend, Friday, Sunday, when we see what's going on with Cooley. If he's still in that role, I think he might have some value over the weekend, but I wouldn't pick him up to start the week. But that's going to do it for this edition of the DFO Fantasy Show. Great to kick off week 10 with you here. A couple of notes before I go. I'm traveling this afternoon, so there will be no show on Tuesday, and there will be no show on Wednesday, unfortunately. So what's going to happen is Thursday, we're going to do a double show. We're going to have Beebs Bondy on. We're going to go over the best waiver wire targets for week 10 of the fantasy hockey season. So our typical Wednesday show with Beebs will be on Thursday. And then in the second half of that show, we're going to bring Dylan on and go over the best weekend streaming targets. There aren't a ton. So Thursday show with Dylan probably going to be pretty short because, as I mentioned, like we're really only going to be looking at the exact same 2 teams. We're going to be talking about the exact same players, and they might already be on your roster. So there's not a ton to go over with Dylan. So that's why instead of jamming it in on a travel day on Wednesday, we're just going to move Beebs' show to Thursday. So that's going to do it for this edition. I won't see you back here for a couple days. Maybe I'll post Brock's lock on Twitter or something like that to get you itching that betting scratch. But that's going to do it. We'll see you back here on Thursday. Until then, cheers. Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.